Ask for the roll call from Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig?
Here.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Henrik?
Here.
Sorry. All present. We do have public comment signed up. Sorry, it's been a while. I saw two of you here, but I wasn't sure. So first up on the agenda is public comment. And I will ask you to come to the microphone over here. It's not going to amplify through the room, but it's for those being recorded.
Oh, yeah.
Speak it as best you can.
I'll try to speak up hearty so you can hear us.
And it looks like Blaine Coleman is up first, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes. So we saw your excellent resolution for Ukraine, and we thought, why not give a try, since we know what's happening in Palestine right now, with a Palestine resolution. You already know that Israel has, been storming the mosque there. You may know a year ago they stormed the church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. 20 years ago they laid siege to the Church of the Nativity. So it's not a good thing. But it's kind of minor compared to major massacres, which Israel has committed over and over in Palestine. Israel has killed thousands of Palestinians. And there's a lot of people in the Southeast Michigan community, even in the Troy community, I'm sure, who are terribly concerned about this, who are Palestinian American, who are Arab American, who are Muslim American, and just plain old people like myself who are concerned about what's happening and would like not to spend $4 billion a year on military aid to Israel. I personally don't want to give Israel $4 billion a year every year. The U.S. is doing that. And I would like to say I object. So a resolution, even a very brief 7-word resolution like you see here, we are against military aid to Israel. Very brief, short and sweet, no complicated financial implications. It just politically says we really don't want our name on this. So that's what I was proposing. If you have any questions, feel free. Hamtramck City Council has very recently, you might have read the Detroit Free Press article, Hamtramck City Council has very recently approved a resolution which is for Palestinian rights, against military aid to repressive governments, and against occupation. In other words, all the things that you objected to in Ukraine, Israel's doing to Palestinians. You objected to what's happening in Ukraine. You expressed your solidarity with the Ukrainian people. And I think you might consider doing the same thing for the Palestinian people. Palestinians, I shouldn't have to say, are humans like us. A lot of them are Christians. A lot of them more are Muslims. There's a lot of reasons that we should have plain old human solidarity with the Palestinian people. Not least of which, that there are many, many Palestinians living here in the community, many Arabs and many Muslims living here in the community like everybody else. And I think we ought to pause for just a moment and consider passing a resolution that would say, yeah, we're against sending military aid to Israel, especially since I'm sure you've been following the news the last week or so. And I really didn't have a whole lot more to say. Go ahead.
That's good, sir. You have 2 seconds left, so it's like your time here is perfectly. All right, thank you. Next up. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, try it. Hello everyone, thanks for the time you're giving us. My name is Dr. Mojgan Savabi Esfahani. I'm a native of Iran and I have lived and worked in Palestine under the occupation of Israel. And I cannot tell you how humiliating that experience is. I cannot tell you how violent that is. I cannot tell you how totally helpless you feel when you live under such a brutal occupation, fully paid by the United States government. I am here because I know there are Arabs in this community, I know there are Palestinians in this community, I know they are all hurting, big time. Why? Because Israel does what it does. It conducts incursions and kills and destroys and uproots trees and arrests people and tortures people, stops women at the checkpoints so they can't get to the hospital and their child dies. You name it, they do it. And who pays for it? We do. I don't want to pay for it. I have, since my college years, stood against military occupation of Israel. I lived and worked there, like I said to you. I watched my students get bashed against rocks and brains come out of their skull. I've watched all of that. And how does Israel get to do it? Because we give them $4 billion a year. When I heard that you have that fantastic resolution against what's happening in Ukraine, which I am fully for, I thought, let's give it a try. They probably understand, they probably know, and they will give a little bit of a voice to Palestinian people. I am sure you've been following all the noise about what even Israelis in Israel are experiencing, which is their government is taking away their rights. And so life is not that, happy-go-jolly as it was before, because they're losing their rights. They themselves, the Israelis are losing their rights. What I'm asking for is a resolution that says we don't want to give military aid to Israel. I want to say, just cut them out. But I will be happy if you pass this, that we don't want to give these lunatics more military aid so they can unleash it on children. Children, 5-year-olds, 3-year-olds, grabbed at any point. I'm sure there's many of you who are mothers here. Imagine that you don't know if your child will come home after he goes to school, after she goes out for a bike ride. It's horrifying, and the world knows it, and in the US this perspective doesn't get enough voice, but we can do something about it. We can say no military aid, at least we're against it. Okay, you want to give it, but we're against it. We can do that very little for Palestinian people. And I want to also say to
That's
you,
your 3 minutes, so we appreciate.
Okay.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up for public
Thank you.
comment this
Thanks,
evening.
everyone.
Appreciate you coming forward and speaking with such passion about issues near and dear to your heart. We will continue on with the business stated in our agenda, and although it's about our budget, there's no aid. There's no international aid as part of this budget, but I understand why you came forward, and we appreciate it very much. So next up is business stated in the special meeting notice, D1, presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2023-24 budget. The proposed budget is available for review on the city's website. And I will, at this point, turn it over to City Manager Miller for the layout of the land.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, rest of council. First, I want to take the opportunity to thank all the staff I won't remember to mention. But the fact is this budget would never be prepared with all the work of a ton of staff. First, the finance department with Rob, Deanne, and Kyle, and anyone else. Rob, you would like to mention from your office?
Everyone back there.
And then every department has a role, and there's multiple layers of people that we're going to help get it done. But I want to also note Beth in our office and Meg kind of put the finishing touches on it for Rob, and thank you to all of them. And it wouldn't happen without them. So I want to get going here. So we're going to go through the budget in brief, go through trends and summaries. Talk about the general fund, special revenue funds, debt service and capital funds, the enterprise funds, the internal service funds, and then we'll have some questions and answers. And excuse me, I'm going to cough. But myself, Bob, and Rob will be speaking this evening like the previous 2 or 3 years. So I want to talk a little bit about what our challenges, priorities, and issues, and our strengths are that we have a diverse tax base with a 23% gap between assessed and taxable value. That's good and bad. That means that our values are a lot more than what we actually get to tax upon in the military. We have very little debt in general. Very little. I mean, I think 1.8% is incredibly low. And obviously that brings us, part of the reason why we have a AAA bond rate. And then we're still within our 20 to 30% general fund fund balance policy. The weakness is charges for services have not kept up with inflation or comparable cities. Some of our capital projects fund has a structural deficit. Obviously, like in many previous years, the Sanctuary Lake and the Aquatic Center are structural deficits because they don't earn enough money to pay for their actual capital repairs and day-to-day running. And then we look at more threats. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index, has been very high this year. I mean, the highest since I think I've been in high school, to be honest. You know, and at 7.9%, which exceeds the 5% cap. What's, you know, this is the first time this has ever happened since Prop A has been with us. What is funny though is that's good because it allows us to increase the taxable value by 5%. But the downside is we have 7.9% inflation, so everything costs more. So actually, we're not the increased ability to raise the taxable values doesn't keep up with inflation. We're not really getting good market returns on our investments, but we are starting to get some interest, which we haven't had in 7-8 years or so. And as always, it seems like we always have unexpected healthcare costs that pop up, and you know, the interest rate risk. And then the opportunities is that we have potential for $4 million for Stevenson Highway, which we've submitted as a community projects funding. I think it's still called that. And then we're seeking $900,000 for state funding for a cricket pitch. So this is the inflation rate change. So we're going back to 1995, and it really was around 3%. And then we can just see where we're at now. It really spiked very high. This is sort of unprecedented. There are people who, in their lifetime, have never seen this before. Excuse me. Well, our budget priorities are obviously to preserve the health, safety, and welfare of the city and our residents, and to maintain our core facilities and infrastructure. And then we focus on these, which include major roads and streets and recreation facilities. But we also, through our advance, we've addressed immediate needs to continue on City Hall, and then we have immediate needs on the Aquatic Center. And then what we've also done is we've taken building inspections in-house as opposed to using Safe Belt. And so therefore, we've invested a lot of money into hiring people and to do this from our own employees, basically. And then we have identified that we want to improve communication and community engagement capabilities. And Bob, why don't you announce it?
Oh, we have hired a new communication community engagement director, and she starts May 1st.
And I will tell you, that was a difficult recruitment. It just wasn't one and done.
Yeah, we had posted it late last year. Didn't get the results we wanted.
Yeah.
Reevaluated the position, and this time around had several great candidates, which HR says that's a little, since the first of the year, we've had more better candidates for a lot of different.
It seems like the employment market is starting to change a little bit for good for us as the employer.
Yeah.
So total revenues before transfers have increased 3.1%. That's 163.9 million to 168.9 million. Our total tax revenues have increased 6.5%, 57.2 million to 60.9 million. And this is primarily due to the 5% increase of the taxable value. And then we continue to get grants and state shared revenue. I will have to say that in my career, we've never focused so much with Rob and your staff and Kyle. Raise your hand, Kyle. Kyle really works on grants, in managing them, and then compliance. And grants have, people don't realize that there's a lot of work, and every grant program's different. And I just sent you some stuff today. I got an email on it today, Kyle. And also I want to identify that we have a lot of one-time federal funding in that category. So charges for services increased 6.9%, 54 million to 57.7 million. And this is primarily due to water and sewer increase of charges. And what happened is Great Lakes Water Authority increased our billing, 7%? Yeah, which was a lot. And so really it's just a pass-through, but we have to do it because they give us the water and they help us take away are affluent. All right, so here we go, revenues, all funds, and so you don't know, I think we do have over 20 funds, and I always forget the exact amount, 22 or 21 of them. And so the biggest blue area is the largest revenue, that's taxes, it's 36%, and that's about 60.9 million. Well, 34% is charges for services, 57.6 million, and then this gray area is grants, 31 million, 18% of our total revenues. And then we have a small smattering ranging 5 to almost 0% of other revenue, interest, rent, licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, and contributions from local governments. I had to ask what that one was right before this meeting, and that's a transfer from the DDA to the city. All right, so now we're going to look at expenditures. And so these have decreased 5.6%, which is 198.5 million to 187.3 million. Personal service, which is basically wages and fringes for employees, increased 3.1%. And that's really interesting because 3.1%, then we look at inflation is 7.9. We're never going to keep salaries up with inflation. That's at 64.9 million, 67 million. And cost of living adjustments and FTEs. And we are, just so that you know, we are working on 2 bargaining units right now. So, that's going to come forward in the future. And other service charges increased 7.4%, 62.9 million to 67.6 million. Once again, this is basically water and sewer purchases. Capital outlays decrease 30.5%, which is a lot, 61.8 million to 42.9 million. This is primarily due to decreased budget, capital expenditures, the reduction of grant funding compared, and less water and sewer projects in this budget, excuse me. Okay, so expenditures in all funds, once again, other service charges is blue, which is the largest, 36%. Well, actually, it's equivalent, basically. For personal service, which is wages and fringe, 67 million. And the gray is capital outlay, that's building and fixing things. And then we have a minor smattering of supplies and debt service. All right, so this is employees that we've added. We talked a little bit about 14 full-time positions we're at. Building inspections is 5, and once again, we have taken over the responsibility to enforce the state building code and its companion codes. City clerk, I want to make a comment here. So the city really relied a lot on part-time employees, and the clerk's office, and especially the library and the recreation department and Public Works relied a lot on part-time employees. So what we've done this year, which is kind of new, we've allowed the department heads to start thinking of consolidating those part-time positions into full-time positions. And although that's not a one-for-one per se, because then they get fringe benefits, but it really helps with delivering services by having a full-time employee as opposed to a lot of part-time employees. And that's true for all of these positions, right, Rob?
Primarily, yes.
Primarily, yeah. Okay. Bob will take over.
Thank you. It's my favorite part of the budget presentation because there's content you can only get here. It's not in the budget book yet, but Rob and I are working on that for next year. So a lot of the information is in the budget book, maybe different chart, different graph, different format. But this shows your Troy City millage rates over the course of the last 10 fiscal years. You can see how that light blue slice at the top, the debt millage, is gone away during that period. The library millage increased after the voters approved the 1.1 mil that we never got to levy. And for the most part, everything else is pretty much the same. Operating has stayed at 6.5 mils during that time. We've taken the Headley override out of the capital portion of the millage. So millage rate pretty stable over that period. But that's just part of what the taxpayer pays when they pay their tax bill. So in addition to that orange city millage rate, you can see the principal residence exemption school rate. That's the largest portion of the bill, and that's fluctuated a little bit more than the city and the everything else. And everything else consists of a lot of countywide stuff, everything from county operations to county parks and rec to the art millage and the zoo and stuff like that. So this is the average taxable value of a residential parcel in Troy. Orange line is adjusted for inflation, blue line's not. So when you take those rates and that average taxable value, you get an average tax bill. So this is, again, the city portion of the average tax bill over the last 10 fiscal years. You can see, obviously, most of it's for operating, followed by capital, refuse, library, and the debt millage, which has gone away. But again, that's only a portion of the total tax bill that the taxpayer pays. So here we've got the PRE school portion of the tax bill, which in Troy happens to be the largest portion of the tax bill. The everything else portion is the second largest, and then in most years. And then the city portion at the top is the smallest portion of the average tax bill. So that's great, but how does it compare to other similar Oakland County communities? Well, if we look at the city portion of the tax bill, we've got Troy's clocking in at the lowest average tax bill, $1,382. The average of these 6 communities is $1,621. And you can see Novi, Royal Oak, Farmington Hills are on the right side, so they have the largest city tax bills. Again, that's just a portion of the tax bill, so you got to look at the school portion. Here, now you've got Troy and Novi and Farmington Hills above the average. And then everything else, the countywide stuff. So the communities that have higher, the tax rates are the same for most of these things. They're countywide millages. So if your taxable value is higher, you're going to pay more than the communities where the average taxable value is lower. So that's why you see Southfield, Royal Oak on the left, Troy and Novi on the right. Add that all together and you get the total tax bill, and you can see how much variation there is among the group here, with Novi and Troy having the largest tax bills, not because the city portion of the tax bill is large, but because the school portion of the tax bill is large. I'll pass it over to Rob to talk about the general fund.
I just had to say that whole section last year, I think, Councilmember Abraham, you summarized the whole budget book into 2 or 3 pages in the trends and summaries, if I recall. Remember that? So there's a lot of good stuff in there. As it relates to general fund, I just want to say that if you guys have questions after this, we have a plethora of knowledge right behind you guys there. That team is so smart and dedicated that feel free to ask lots of questions, because they'll have the answers for us. The general fund, so important. It's basically what our bond ratings based off of is the general fund. Everything runs through the general fund ultimately. So our finance team, the rest of the department heads, we treat this like our own bank account. We really do. We scrutinize every item that goes through these accounts, because it's the taxpayers' money, not ours, and so we just try to do the best we can with it. But a lot of the general fund really drives the city as well, so a lot of what Mark touched upon will be the same answers here, so I won't dwell on them too much. But bottom line is revenue's up 6.6% for the year, and that big part of it's primarily the 5% increase that the state allowed us to increase taxable value, and then the rest is the uncapping of new properties and also any type of new construction. So that's where you go from 5% to up to the 6.6%. and we talked about the inflation rate multiplier, so you can go to the next slide. State shared revenue up 12.3%. Part of that increase from last year is because the 9.2 was artificially low. Always try to budget conservatively. And so if you recall a year ago, we still didn't know what was happening with the pandemic. And the other thing that happened was the city census came in at that time, and Troy grew where a lot of communities didn't. So we have benefited from our growth in population in the state shared revenue calculation. So that 10.4, hopefully the economy stays relatively strong and we get that number. Charges for services were up 11%, and really in talking to Brian, we're getting close to our pre-pandemic revenues for our recreation department. So that hopefully makes sense as you guys are seeing everyone open up. So this is just a pie chart that's in your book, and 62% of it comes from taxes, state share revenues next at 16, charges for services 13, and the rest is the rest. You can move to the next one. Expenditures on an overall basis up 3.3%. So, you know, Mark had just said inflation's 7.9. Why is this only 3.3? If you think about it, we have contracts that are settled with unions with, and remember, the majority of our general fund expenditures are through labor, right? So the majority of the union contracts were signed at 2, 2.5, or 3%. So that's why you're going to see this be a little lower than what current inflation is. Next one. So expenditures by category, as you can see, we are a service industry, so personal services is almost 2/3 of our general fund budget. Other service charges at 28, which also includes contractual consulting, etc. And you can move to the next one. So this is broken down. We've talked about this over the years several times. This shows what our community puts their focus on, and it's 60% of our general fund dollars go to public safety. And a lot of communities have a recreation special revenue fund. So if you actually took that 13% out, the gray part, if you took that 13% out of our general fund, you would actually see us be over 2/3. So we're right in line with most communities. Next slide. All right, so this fund balance, it's busy, but if you look at fiscal year 22 on the bottom and you look at the last 2 years, you can see our general fund unassigned fund balance, the top blue line, is going down, and that's because what we're going to propose to you over the next 2 council meetings with the potential closure of the VFIP. So that's going to cause a payment out of the general fund if that's what you so choose to approve, and then going down to 2024. But we'll show you a slide in a minute where that leaves our fund balance as a percentage. But non-spendable, that big orange line, that's one of the things that keeps me up at night. That is the dollars that we continue to spend from the general fund to support the aquatic center and also Sanctuary Lake. And so the aquatic center doesn't, as of now, we're moving forward with it. And Sanctuary Lake, we will continue to help pay for this through the end of the bonds, which is 2028. So we still have another 5 years of bond payments to make. The assigned fund balance, that is nothing more than our deficit spending for the given year and $3 million for any types of liabilities or lawsuits or anything like that. And then restricted has gone away according to our GASB. And what that is we still, in our budget book, we still have our help me out, Kyle or Dan, what's the 1.6 million we have? Budget stabilization. That's it. Budget stabilization. For the GASB, they've thrown it into assigned fund balance, so that's where what we've done with it. Now this is a great slide that Bob actually created, and it shows the the 30% is the top end of our funding policy, and then the orange line is the bottom fund balance policy floor. And you can see on the far right in 2023 and 2024, we are still in compliance, just barely. So if you look over the past decade, we were flirting with 30 or more percent. Right now we're flirting with the 20%. Okay, general fund expenditures by public safety. If you look at that, there's nothing too sexy there. It's just up 3.4%. One risk in there is that we put in a modest increase for one of the biggest unions that we have, which is police. And so that's going to be a very interesting negotiation that's happening right now. General government, same thing, about 3.5% increase, and again, primarily due to personnel costs. Next slide. Recreation and culture, again, you see that same percentage. Again, nothing major changing there. Community development's flat. Public Works is up a little bit more, and within there we have some maintenance. We have some chair replacement within this building. That's about 1% of that increase, and the rest then is personnel increase and some increase in maintenance. And then the transfer outs, that's where I think we've talked before about if our general fund balance unassigned gets a little too close to 20%, we may have to cut back and no longer give money to the capital projects fund. So this is where us being closer to 20% is a risk to other funds and other projects such as capital. Love this slide. This is something to be proud of. We always talk about this. Our pension and our retiree health care are legacy costs, as we like to call them, right? If you look to the left, the pension is 124% funded. This is as of our last audit date. And that's great news. Again, we're way above the average in the state of Michigan. The 77% retiree health care, there's some cities that don't pre-fund at all. We are 3/4 of the way there. If you're wondering in comparison, this is after the stock market went way down last year. A year ago, we were at 148% to the left and about 90% to the right. So we did fall, but we're still in great shape, especially compared to our peer cities.
Rob, do you have any idea off the top of your head how many employees that would still qualify for an old school pension? Not many.
The one on the left?
Yeah.
Yeah, old school pension, we're down to about 20 actives that are still in the plan. Yeah. And so this is the funding that we put into this current budget on the pension side. And you can see for the people that are still in the old school pension, it costs us $0 right now because we're overfunded. And then to the right, our retiree health care, we pay about $2.5 million in this budget for all those employees that are still in that plan. And we have a $30 million liability that we need to pay off over time. We hope with positive investment return, we actuarially are counting on 6.5%. Hopefully that turns around after the 15% losses that we took last year in the fund.
Thanks. So I'm not going to stand up this time. So this is special revenue funds, and these major streets and local streets. Rob, can you explain what the change was on these? Did we have to account for these differently?
Yeah,
recently,
so
the past year?
yeah, a couple of years ago, Troy was one of the few cities that included all of their major and local street fund within their general fund balances, and then did journal entries to allocate them out to these funds. Now we record everything directly to these funds.
So they're a standalone fund, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so the revenues have increased 2.7%, about 7.5 million to 7.7 million. This is gas tax increases. And the expenditures and transfers out increased over 37%, 7.4 million to 10.2 million. And this is primarily to Rochester Road improvements and Stevenson Highway projects. And at the local street level, revenues increased 2.3%, 4.4 million to 4.5 million. That's gas tax, that's hard to say, gas tax revenue increases. And the expenditures and transfers out increased 25.7%, 5.5 million to 6.7 million. And then the other special revenue fund that actually is very important is refuse and recycling. And this has increased 6.8%, which is 6.1 million to 6.5 million. And this is due to the taxable value increases. And this is sort of a pass-through type of situation too. We have to pay for it, and we really can only levy what we need to pay for. And the expenditures are increased 7.8%, 6 million to 6.5 million, and that's just contractual increases. And then now, because we have a millage, the library is a special revenue, and the revenues increased 9%, 6.3 million to 6.9, and that's taxable value increases also. And then we're doing a lot of work there, as you know, because you're improving the contracts for improvements, and that's increased 11%, 7.2 million to 6.4 million. And we've done for 2.2 million of building improvements last year, and coming up $600,000 of improvements. Right on the agenda tonight, we have skylights and card readers. Go ahead, Rob.
So debt service, as you know, we have really two big pieces of debt left. One is out of the DDA, and that's approximately $9.6 million. The other one that's not on this screen is for Sanctuary Lake, and that's an enterprise fund. That's why it doesn't go through our debt service. But another small piece is the George Kuhn drain for $240,000 this year, or that's what's left in it. That's really it for debt service. If we ever decide to do any type of major capital initiative and pay for it through a debt millage, it would go through that. Capital Projects Fund, I'm just going to read off the slide. There are many needs to maintain core facilities and infrastructure and to keep existing facilities and services operating effectively while alternatives and large capital considerations are considered. So, like Mark had mentioned at the advance, you guys gave us the direction to continue to work on this building, to continue working on the aquatic center, which we have been doing, and it's in this budget as well. And then as we progress, maybe there'll be another funding. As you'll see throughout the rest of this presentation, we're getting dangerously low in our fund balance on the capital projects fund as well. So revenues actually did decrease this year, and it's basically, we had ARPA fund dollars in there in the past, and this year we don't have those same returning funds. And then transfers did increase, and the main increase is we've taken the funds that Mark just talked about, the major and local street funds, we've taken as much out of those funds as that is responsible and put them into the capital projects fund, because we, again, have made a huge, huge commitment to the roads in this town. Next one. So this is just a depiction, a pie chart of the revenues, and again, transfers in, led by major funds at about 5 million, local by 3 million. Those are the biggest transfers into this fund. Grants, again, this is primarily Rochester Road, and that makes up the majority of the 9.5 million. And then taxes, really interesting thing here this year. We did not get hit by Headley in 2024, so there's no Headley rollback this year. So that's good news, and if you have further questions about that later, Kelly can probably give you a really good explanation on that. Next slide. So this is the expenditures, and again, I just mentioned we're spending a lot on roads/streets, whatever we want to call it, and it's $20.8 million, 66% of our capital budget this year on roads. So again, we have some of the best. If you compare ourselves on our PASER rating compared to our surrounding communities, you can tell that Troy roads are much better than the average community. Parks is the next biggest at 12%, and recreation at 9%, and then the rest fall in there. So, capital projects fund, streets, Rochester Road at 7.6 million and Stevenson at 4.0. Rochester Road is being funded 80% approximately by the feds. Stevenson Highway, Mark mentioned it earlier, we just put in for a grant for that, so that would be amazing if we could get federal funding for that project. And then we have industrial road maintenance at 1.5 million. The parks, we have Sylvan Glen Lake Park, 1.5 million. Again, that was through a federal grant. Range Tree Park Cricket Field, we are hoping to get a grant for that at $900,000. And then we have playground structures at $600,000. That's primarily that. Recreation. So this is my fourth budget, and with Dennis and Kurt, we have just done a great job of putting roofs and HVACs in all of our buildings. And this is actually Dennis, help me, 3 or 4? Phase 3? This is phase 3 of replacing HVAC, and this is gonna finish off the community center with roofs and HVAC. And so that's a really big deal. And to be honest with you, when we put this budget together, we went back and forth and grappled with this, and at the end, we recommended to Mark to put that in there so we could finish off the recreation this year. Community center pool repairs at $500,000, and there's also more community center items in there, but those are the 2 big ones. The library, we got 1.3 million. The collection development, that's an item that's in there every year. It's $600,000. We continue to update our collection, and a lot of that's subscriptions and things like that. The other 2 main things we're doing is the lobby renovation for $400,000 and the cafe. Cafe is where, and Emily can probably give you more color on that, but that's really used as a study area, a work session, and so we think we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck by renovating that cafe. So this is a fund balance. As you can see, through the 2023 amended, we're thinking it's going to be about $5 million, and then after this budget, it's going to be around 3. And so that's getting a little, the hair on my neck goes up a little bit, saying like, oh, that's getting a little close to my comfort zone. I don't want to go, Deanne, Kyle, and I, we talked about this at length, and we did not want to propose anything to Mark that went below $3 million. So we're right at $3 million. Again, we've really lowered our fund balances in our streets and roads to make this budget happen.
Next, enterprise funds. Sanctuary Lake, we talked about this already. There's bond payments on Sanctuary Lake until 2028. So it has losses until the bonds are paid off. And you've seen a variation of this chart from time to time. I actually shortened up the time horizon, just went back to 2015. But this is on with the current pace over the next 3 fiscal years as proposed. You'll see that basically the debt to the general fund will increase until those bonds are paid off. Sylvan Glen doesn't have that problem, so even though revenues are flat and expenditures are expected to increase, it doesn't have the same kind of debt to the general fund that Sanctuary Lake does. The Aquatic Center has also been mentioned a couple times already. We've got big increases in both revenue and expenditures this year. That's kind of as we get back to pre-pandemic activity levels. And the Aquatic Center Fund is kind of an oddball because, the Aquatic Center season starts in May, but the fiscal year starts July 1. So each budget year has got half of a Aquatic Center season in it. But we're also projecting losses the next several years. So this is another chart that you've seen before, but this one, today it graduated from thousands to millions, which is not a good type of graduation, as it continues to rely on general fund support going forward. A little ray of sunshine with our enterprise funds is our water and sewer funds. Sewer fund revenues increased 7.5%, mostly higher costs and lower use. Expenditures are decreasing, mostly because we had big capital expenses last year. And as an example, there's $4 million just for the Evergreen Farmington sanitary drain in the previous fiscal year. On the water side, revenues are increasing 4.8% due to rate increases to offset the increases that we're seeing from Great Lakes Water Authority, and expenditures, same, fewer capital items this year. So these are your water and sewer rates from 2017 to current. You can see how they kind of trend up, which may look a little scary until you look at this chart, which shows that Troy's got the lowest average quarterly bill of our comparable communities, and I thank Kurt and Paul Trosper and his staff for doing a survey and getting the data together for this chart.
Okay, internal service funds are a unique animal, and it's sort of a way in which cities can deliver what I call backdoor services. So the first one is for building operations. So each department pays, let's just call it rent, and that rent is for heating, cleaning, anything else?
It's just basic
Yeah,
services, yeah.
And so each department pays that, and the rate is set by Public Works, and the revenues increase 4%, and the expenditures increase 3.9%. And then information technology is a way which IT bills the department so that they can provide computers and computer applications and other services. The revenues increase 4.6% and expenditures increase 13%. And then fleet, and this is to deliver vehicles, which include cars, trucks, and some other types of things like lawn care equipment. And the revenues increased 3.8%, and the expenditures increased 13.8%. I would have to say that in the past couple of years, it's been sort of difficult in finding vehicles, and my hat is off to fleet for looking at creative ways to find vehicles in alternative ways in which municipalities normally do it. They just go get them, basically. And thanks to everybody. Here's a list, but that doesn't include everyone. And one thing I would like to mention, that we do have a study meeting scheduled next week at 6 o'clock, and we're ready and available to meet if you so desire to meet on that day. And we can answer questions now, and we obviously can answer questions up until the public hearing date for the budget, which is, what's the date? I don't even know off the top of my head.
May something.
May 8th. 9th? Well, I actually, is it on here? No.
It's a,
Yeah, May 8th.
Well, thank you, Mark, Bob, Rob, everyone who's here who's not going to have much time to say much, but you're here and smiling. We appreciate that. I know it's a lot that goes into it. We have about 15 minutes, I think, for questions now. Because of that, let's, if we can, hold maybe some comments back a little bit, unless they're necessary for right now. I say that only because of time, and I want to make sure everybody gets any questions asked. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to have this in advance, and I think I know the process has been. The next budget will start May 9th for the next year. That's the way it works for all of you, and we get involved in our advance, and then we're here. So. I know it's a lot of work that goes into it. So let's start with questions from council. I'm going to start here if that's okay. Mayor Pro Tem Chamberlain Craig.
Happy to dive in, thank you. I did have a chance to sort through and prioritize all of my questions, but recognizing we have 15 minutes, a lot of these we can submit them this week, is that
Definitely.
right, as Q&A?
Definitely.
So I will just try to highlight the ones that were most burning, and bear with me as I sort through them. One of the burning questions for me in the past year, and this relates to a good friend of mine, you guys might know Chuck Shepard, he gave me this book that really kind of dives into the challenges around municipalities have around maintenance. Like, how do you factor in maintenance? You have TFAC at one point 30 years ago, beautiful building, but how do you factor in all those maintenance needs when capital projects they decrease in value and all that and deteriorate. So one of the questions I want is how does maintenance, how is that all factored in? I don't know if there's a way to kind of describe that. How's that factored into the capital planning? And then with that, a related question is, in my role with Michigan Municipal League, I've been visiting other municipalities, and one thing I've seen in other communities is that you have communities, especially those who maybe have a strong community foundation, is there's actually endowments set up for just maintenance, from everything from trails and pathways, just maintenance for that, to an endowment that's just for a band shell, to an endowment for a cemetery. And the city managers I've talked to have found that that's actually been very effective, is having these kind of set endowments with a community foundation that are dedicated just to this particular kind of maintenance need. So just, A, how does maintenance factor in, and is that something that's ever come up in Troy as something that, ever could be approached around?
I have a follow-up question to your question. Is it the city funding the endowments operated by somebody else, or are you saying through donations?
Often it is through donations, and often there may be a private donor who starts the process with that.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted
So I'll start to answer this, and Kurt, you can kick in and add to it. Okay, regarding maintenance in general, about, I'm guessing 6, 7, 8 years ago, we did a facilities assessment, which actually looked at all of our buildings and structures, and it set and analyzed their quality or level of maintenance, and it set forth recommendations on when the repair would need to occur, and we use that all the time to decide when to replace the roofs Rob mentioned. But I will say that it's getting close to do a new one, because the other one's getting old. And then, related to endowments, we do work a little bit with endowments with the library, definitely, and is it the community? What's it's more of a community foundation, Troy Community Foundation, that they help us pay for bicycle repair station, and what else? Anything?
That's less of a fund, I think maybe that's a, yeah.
So what I would say is the library has done it a lot more than everything else, but we have limited experience more in the general area.
Okay, I'm gonna follow up later, because I do have questions. The facilities assessment, is that same as the building assessment study?
Yes.
And then, how does that dovetail with the 6-year capital improvement plans? I know
It
those are roads.
feeds the capital plan, basically.
So it feeds it, okay, because I had a question.
But
How do
it's
those things
starting to get old, and a lot of the things have been accomplished, and so all the check marks are getting filled in, and we probably need to do it. Do you have any timeline, Kurt, that you might?
Next 2 to 3 years.
Next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, great.
And I would say that has been a great tool, because it sets forth everything that we need to do.
And then that, okay, that's helpful to know how that building assessment feeds into the capital improvement.
Hey, Mark, can I say something?
Sure.
Kurt, why don't you talk about the fleet and how
Yeah,
that's...
that's probably the most sophisticated way
Yeah.
when we approach our assets. So we have software that actually looks at the cost of the vehicle or piece of equipment, and looks at all the maintenance throughout its useful life. And it also takes into consideration what the value of that at its end of its useful life. And it computes that all and tells us, okay, expect to replace that in so many hours or in so many years, depending on if it's a vehicle or a piece of equipment. Our building assets and things like that, we go through the same process, just it's not quite as sophisticated as a vehicle, because we don't go and sell it when we're done with it, right?
Right. No, that's helpful. And this question might also connect with Kurt as well. So I'm aware that end of last year, there was a concrete shortage around the slab replacement that relates to the local roads. Are we at all concerned, with the new kind of local road repairs and the sidewalks? I know what is budgeted to do more sidewalk work as well.
We're told no. So, our main slab replacement contractor that council just recently awarded Delisio again, they deal with one company, a transit company, Protocon. They're one of the last mom and pop type of companies around. Most of them are larger corporations nationwide. So they've got a real good pulse on the cement shortage. They don't believe there's going to be much of a shortage now. So hopefully they've built up supply over the winter, and they'll be able to fulfill all the orders.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kirk. Because I know in my neighborhood, there were questions and stuff, so thank you. You guys were all so incredibly helpful with that when those questions came. Also getting lots of questions about pickleball, but I see I was going to ask, is it this fiscal year? It is. May follow up with what all does that entail, but I'll follow up with that later. Great to see also about cricket. There's something requested from the state. That's wonderful. Another question was around kind of placemaking. I know I've brought up before, and you've shared this, Mark. You call it's tactical urbanism. So I've had residents raise, for example, the Jamestown Bark, opportunities to kind of liven it up in different ways that would help even the farmers market and whatnot. Just wondering, I don't know how much this is a budget question, but to what extent do we have the staff capacity, do we have interest, that if there are grants that may come up to do some sort of tactical kind of, placemaking, is that something that, there's a space for that to happen? I don't know who's kind of leading on some of that or would take charge of that, but.
I would argue the skating amenity with the pavilion is like placemaking on steroids.
For sure. But some of the things like a giant chess set or other little things, I know that, hearing there's some residents, community leaders that sometimes, I believe was some recent funding that came out for some small little things. So just wondering, we don't want to burden staff, we want to respect staff, but just wondering, I'm a passionate person of like, how can we add these little like tactical things in? So I can ask more of that question.
Mark, if I may. So, the saying there's no such thing as a free lunch, if you talk to Kurt, Kyle, and Deanne right now, Mark, myself, we are struggling mightily with the red tape that the federal government gives you with doing a grant. We're slowed down. At the last council meeting, I believe you talked about how we're slowed down because of whatever. Environmental, right. And when you take that, if you wanted to ever sit down and talk to Kyle about the painstaking time that he's spending, there literally is no such thing as a free lunch. I love that in this budget we've talked about all the federal dollars. It's killing us.
Oh my goodness.
Just being honest.
Yeah, no, it's helpful to know that.
Can you do like one more now, because we're at the,
Okay, I'll hold off a lot.
you can send them to write it, of course.
I will
We all-
send
we
them.
just-
I think one thing I'll sort of end, I had some, about the pool manager and all of that. Just hope we can do a budget infographic again this year. It's just helpful to way to share out with the community. And then my other big thing was kind of TFAC. We're approving, we see the numbers, it's not looking good, it needs a little love, needs some decision making. With this new community engagement director, I can't remember if it was out of the advance, we had agreed that what needs to happen kind of next is once you have that position is work with recreation and start the process of like doing some engagement, creating some spot interviews with with those who are using it actually, and start kind of a real robust sense of getting input to them because it needs the community engagement that's my belief, before we make any bigger decisions. We need the community engagement. So wondering, what that might look like. Maybe less of a budget question, but, it's something that requires, of course.
Mark, may I one more time? So regarding TFAC and Sanctuary Lake, our finance team, Kyle, Deanne, Rob, the three of us, we've talked a ton because we have a new auditor coming in. They're going to take a fresh set of eyes on this. They might say to us, you have to put this TFAC into the general fund. You have to start charging interest to Sanctuary Lake, or you might have to make Sanctuary Lake part of the general fund. We don't know those answers yet, so we're meeting with our auditor next week, Wednesday, and so that's going to be the start of something that may change the way this budget book looks like. When you have a new auditor, new fresh set of eyes, they might make decisions for us on some things, so I just wanted to pass that along.
I also want to say from a human side, not a spreadsheet side, the residents don't care what it looks like on a balance sheet. It's government providing the swimming pool. So it shouldn't matter so much what the funds look like. It's a service of our government we're paying for. Just as a reminder to everybody.
Fair point.
I understand all of the way the funds are set up. And we talked a couple of years ago about whether we should even have those funds if we were going to look at the ramifications of changing that. But it's 30 plus years old, we do need to address it. But I don't think our residents care if the one page of our budget says this and the other thing. I don't think it's as crucial. So we're gonna have to go lightning round on questions at this point. I hate to be like that, but David?
Yeah, and I had questions on sustainability, but we're going to talk about that in a special dedicated session in a couple of months. One question I had is where are we with trails and pathways? I think I saw 2.25 million put in that in fiscal year 25, was it?
I think due to capacity, we're delaying a year or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, capacity and, with the developments of the Robertson Brothers that council approved and the other things going on, that's the next section.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll get an opportunity with the Troy School District meeting coming up to re-engage them, to go through their property. So that would be the next section, and that would be over a mile of trail. It would be one of our biggest trails.
And where will that one be?
It would actually take off at Waddles Road, where the first segment, and take it all the way to Long Lake and be able to almost connect to Sylvan Glen.
Okay. And then my other question was, how are we on filling positions? I know someone briefly mentioned that it's getting easier, specifically with police recruitment. I always know we budget for full staffing, but we've struggled with that. I think we have done some hiring, but do we have any update on if that's getting better?
As long as just looking at anyone else can answer, but
Yeah,
see Frank or Jeanette.
I can answer. I think we have 10 openings right now in the police department, and it's still a struggle. There's not as many qualified applicants, and we're keeping our standards high. So it's still the same story there.
Right, but we have had some incentives where if you have experience, you shoot up in the pay scale, and you get leave time when you start working, which when I started here, that wasn't the case.
Right. Might be something we need to talk about in the next advance.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And you had 6 questions that we did answer earlier today.
Yeah,
You good?
I'm good on all this.
Okay.
For that.
You're welcome.
I'm good.
Yeah, okay. I was going to ask about the grant, whether the grants that are showing up there are ongoing, but it sounds like maybe not because of the red tape.
Oh, no, they're ongoing. They're hot and heavy.
I mean, in terms of like years down the road, are we going to scale it back, or are we going to continue to?
No plans to scale it back, unfortunately, Kyle.
Well, I think it's fair to say that the level of federal funding that we're experiencing now
impressive.
is,
That would be,
it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So,
And again, we've got those big silver scissors, so we do really well cutting through the red tape.
yeah.
Thanks to a good team.
Absolutely.
No, we really help how it feeds the capital fund and helps us get things done, because anything we pay in the capital fund helps other areas of.
Yeah, and maybe you need to explain what's going on. We literally, from the politicians at the state and federal level, they will contact
Drive is crazy.
Mark and say, hey, I need something in 2 days, I need something in a day. Thank God we have a great team. So what Kyle, Dean, and myself, we've done, along with Kurt's help and Dennis's help, we've built off of our capital plan, we've built a database. So right now, when the next politician comes with their, is it handout? No, not handout, saying, give us something. We literally, Kyle, how many projects we got out there? 8, 10, 12?
Probably about, I'd say a dozen.
Yeah. So, and we have them at all different dollar levels. We have them at all different types, like, Cricket. And I'll be honest with you. So, hey, we went to the last, and I don't want to say her name, but it was a state rep, and we're like, hey, you can choose from, this is good from, picking this project for the demographics of our community. It was Cricket. Then it's like, oh, hey, let's choose a state road. So we give the politician, 4 or 5 choices. And
A menu.
A menu, thank you. And they choose it. It's really great. And it's a lot to the team back there that helps us.
In terms of the increase in revenue that we're getting from property taxes, do we have a sense of how much of that is just the existing property that's going up in value versus new properties? And I ask this because I hear a lot of chatter on social media about, all of these new houses going up, we're just trying to increase the tax base.
Well, I'll answer this and we'll let Kelly answer, but a lot of it is that we were allowed to raise it 5% because of the high inflation, CPI.
Cal, did you want to answer it?
It went up 6.9%, so the 5% was the existing residents, and the 1.9 would include uncappings for people that just moved here and new construction. That would be the 1.9%.
There is concern after COVID is, empty buildings, what's going to happen with office buildings. There's concern. So if they can't fill buildings, their value will go down.
And then just lastly, in this, maybe there's no answer for this, long-term solutions for our beloved aquatic center and how to fund it? I mean, other than it being transferred from enterprise to general perhaps?
how do we address, aside from community engagement, I think 7 of us have some ideas or thoughts on it. How do you think we could best effectively discuss that issue? Are we at the point, at some point, where we should have an aquatic center's study session? I mean, community engagement's important, but we can't go to the community without some options, I think. I mean, if we're just soliciting, I mean, I don't know what you need for, we've talked about it for, we were on Zoom when we first started talking about it.
Right.
But so, I mean, what's the preferred method from us to get you to, you tell us it's bad, we know, what do you need from us to actually do something about it?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so the community doesn't care where it's at, but the reason why I haven't pushed to bring it into the general fund is because I want it there out in everyone's face to see it, like it's bleeding, okay? If it falls into the general fund, then it's just something that the general fund sucks up and no one ever talks about anymore. So I personally am trying to push the issue and say, hey, we have to address this. This is, again, my 4th budget and it's bleeding. So yes, I think that we need a major study session. I think Dennis, Kurt, minimally, Brian, I think everyone's got to be there, and I think we got to talk about it.
The thing is, if you want to keep it, it's going to cost money. It's just the way it is.
Well, okay.
I'm not sure where we could get it, off the top of my head, I don't know where we could get additional revenues for it.
Well, I don't think we can.
Right.
So we need to decide, are we gonna figure out a way to rebuild? Are we gonna shut it down? I hate that. But I mean, or are we gonna just supplement it out of the general fund and let it become an old
Let me be
facility?
clear, it belongs in the general fund long-term, but I just want everyone to know that if it goes into the general fund, that this thing bleeds, and do we as a community want to keep supporting something from Memorial Day to Labor Day? And maybe the answer is yes, but I think that's something we need to.
But I do think the secondary question is, it's an aging facility, and from a facility
Correct.
standpoint,
Yes.
we can't do that at a certain point. I mean, we're probably pushing it now, so, right? I mean,
I think a study session would be the way to deal with that.
Okay, really quick, not to interrupt, but I know that we did actually talk about a potential idea in the advance, but basically it would probably require a new bond, and that's where we felt like, well, you know,
It's
it's,
a lot of money.
yeah, so.
We talked about a splash pad attached to the community center and all of
Or a
that
large
stuff, or a large
pool.
pool and stuff like that.
Well,
But,
there, like you said, there are options, we just
Right.
need to determine what those.
and there are other pressing things that have been happening for the past 6+ months, so I understand that. We're looking to this next year. And we good for now?
Yeah.
Teresa?
I'll be quick, yeah, the aquatic center obviously stood out to me. Now, we had talked about the union contracts, and that's a lower rate. Are we concerned that when those contracts are up, that will be problematic potentially?
Yes. I would say in my career, I've never faced a negotiation, and I don't think Deanne has either, and we've both been around 30 years, that inflation's at 7.9%. If I'm the union guy, I'm sitting there going, 7.9%, I want it, we can't afford it, right? So it's gonna be an interesting negotiation. I can't wait to see what happens in the next 2 months.
We're already in interesting negotiations.
Yes, we are. That is true. Right. We've just started, so it's going to be really, really interesting. I hope that the police contract is done June 30th. I hope sometime in June we're coming to you with a ratified contract. I'm hoping.
So we'll know by then?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I mean, I had some personnel questions and things like that, but I'm good.
Put it in writing.
Yeah, I'll put it in writing.
Oh, thanks, Teresa.
I can ask most of these questions in writing, and you've actually answered a lot of them as you went along. I just want to, I love the aquatic center, but also what happened due to inflation to our plans for the youth services section of the library is equally on my mind, and that's a year-long need.
But I don't think that that's going to go away forever.
I know, but I don't want to not demonstrate that we're all talking about it and that it's not on our minds.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it at our advance, and that is on our minds, and I just wanted to say that out loud. So I don't know if that needs, that's going to be an agenda item one day or a study session, whatever it needs to help us recover that from that situation, which was no fault of anyone's. We're going to need to do that. That's something I do hear about a lot in the community.
And that money's still in the fund balance, and it's ready to be spent on that project. I think we have to retune and refine it.
And make that money work in the way that we wanted to, so.
Correct.
And I can, go ahead.
I'll be brief. One quick one about TPAC. If there is going to be a study session, I would want Jeanette there too. I know we had a lot of dialogue around staffing and making sure that whomever is there is using the facilities, that we have ample lifeguards to protect our community. So that's I'll stop with TVAC there. The other comment about grants, I totally hear what you're saying about no free beer. However, I will say this, for a city that is a donor city and a donor county, it is really nice to see momentum changing where both our state level and federal level representatives are coming to us as frequently as they are and then delivering on it. And so just something to think about here is if we continue to get more grants, do we need to supplement poor Kyle there? Because there is a lot of red tape. I support a government contract. I understand the red tape completely, but it seems like our success rate of recent years is pretty high, and it seems reasonable to think it's going to stay high. And so if we need to think about supplementing so that poor Kyle can take a vacation day every once in a while, that would be a good thing. And I think some of it might also just be experience too. If we have this many grants from different entities that have different requirements, our experience will grow. And so maybe it'll be slightly less onerous. Not completely.
Yeah.
I'm a government contractor.
I think there'll come a time when these dry up too.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's ride the wave while we can.
We're being aggressive, we really are.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get our money back to the city that paid a lot of taxes.
Yes.
Okay, I just have one question that I want to say now. And I should have put it in writing before, and I apologize, but I think we've given consensus a couple times for park signage to match the Gene Stein Park. And we've talked about the community center sign, it's awful. And I don't see any specific funding for that in here. I might not see it in here because that might be too small, but is that something that is still on the radar? We talked about placemaking, signage is a big part of that. It's not exactly what you meant, but our tertiary signs are still embarrassing. Half of them are faded or you can't read them. It's the old logo, we know that. I know there's been a concern expressed about the signs from 4 years ago that were proposed, that we didn't approve, the old council. I don't think, based on my understanding from our previous meetings and consensus we've given, we're as concerned about trying to match signs to that. I think we agreed that the Gene Stein Park signs were sufficient for our other parks and other maybe civic center stuff. I think I was also told that would be in the next budget, and I don't know if it's here. Forgive me for not knowing, or if it's somewhere written. Do you have anything you want to say about that now?
I don't know if it's in here.
It is not in here. It is not.
And we'll work on a response.
Okay. Ellen? We want it badly, and I know there's a lot going on, and we've given consensus, and I just don't know.
I'm nodding
I'll be
really
out building
hard.
the signs myself, and I don't know if that's a good idea. I know there's a lot of competing interests, and there's a lot going on that's more important than what our park signs look like, and yet also, if I have concerns about us giving direction to do something, and if it's not happening, that's another potential issue.
That is something we do get feedback.
Yeah.
Or I hear about them looking tired.
It's forward facing, it's the image of our city.
It's the image, yeah.
If that would only solve all the outstanding. But okay, other than that, we've got 15 minutes to our next meeting, so I am going to adjourn this one. But
Real quickly.
yeah, Ellen.
We didn't specifically, as council members, bring up public safety.
Oh.
That should not by any way indicate to residents that are watching, but that is a first, and I think we talked a little about police hiring and whatnot. The police, fire alliance, we know the residents see that as a priority. It's a huge priority in the budget. It goes without saying, so it kind of went almost without saying tonight. So I just wanted to
It's-
call that out.
It's in here, the increased firefighter proposed spending for 23 is in here, 22, 23. The future, I mean, the.
New apparatus in a couple of years.
Yes, we are focused a little bit on the specific capital projects, it feels like right now in some general terms.
I just
but
didn't want that
yes,
lost.
That's the number one priority of all of us, I believe, in City Hall and our residents, so thanks for reminding everyone on it. Thank you, everybody. My only question about a meeting a week from tonight at the 6 o'clock is, I think there's a lot of questions still that are gonna be asked in writing. I don't know if that's gonna generate something that will need discussion, or if they're gonna be fine to have question and answer only in writing. Often it's not, the written answers are not as, they're thorough, but they're not necessarily absorbed as well, I think, by some of us, and sometimes there's follow-up questions.
Well, we're ready and available to meet.
I mean, we're scheduled for, council, quick consent, I mean, I don't know what you all think. Do you feel like we would, I also don't want to have a meeting where we sit here and get there and we have no questions and nothing to talk about. That's not fair to all of you and to you especially, but I don't know if there's a feeling that we know, I mean, we were very light on specifics tonight. I don't know if there's anything more we need to dig into on, more specifically.
I've been doing this a while, I'm in the rhythm of this, I have heard things, I've read it thoroughly. I personally am good, but I don't have any issue if my colleagues would like to meet.
Again, the questions that, for example, the questions that Rebecca asked, I may have good follow-ups to, and they may generate more conversation, and I don't want anyone to feel shortchanged, because if we are, then we're not armed, but we need to go to the public and be prepared to answer questions. So, if we could commit to asking our questions in the next day or two, and then we can review whether, I mean, if there's, let me put it this way, if you're the only one that submits questions in writing, maybe the written responses will suffice and we can figure it out, but if there's a bunch from us, I don't know, Mark, maybe you can then reach back out to us and let
Yes.
us know what you've received and whether or not it might be advisable. That would be my suggestion. Does that make sense?
And Mayor, I'm happy, I can always follow with Mark if I have further questions. If you guys see some of the answers or see what I asked and you want to follow up with me, I welcome your input as well.
I mean, we probably won't get any answers to the questions until a week from now anyway, that's the other concern. So I don't know, maybe I'm pontificating from the table, which is never good. I'm just trying to
I'll have a
be-
few, but they'll probably be more nerdy, and I think written form
What is
is
this
fine.
fund and how much did this percentage and yeah.
We know they'll be nerdy.
I think, so I'm good on.
We love that about you.
Yes.
Can we leave it then at weigh in with Mark in the next day or two, if you think, and then you can make that judgment call, and if it's necessary,
Yeah.
just, we'll cancel it.
I mean, we'll definitely be able to get your answers back before the end of this week, easily.
Okay. Fair? All right, there's no other business, so we are adjourned.
Thank you.